TheBeat.
Welcome to the Beat podcast, where we continue our coverage of the playoffs. I'm MJ here with
BD.
And we got a lot of great topics this week to talk about. A lot of surprises in the first round of the playoffs. A lot of exciting matchups in the second round of the playoffs, which actually I think could determine the NBA champion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
All right. Well, in the first round, there were a lot of, I think, very interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
The East was, I guess, went the way you would think, maybe other than the Toronto-Washington series, but
Yeah.
pretty much everyone won as expected. The higher seed won in every case, other than that one.
Only surprises to us.
Yeah, but I think we did pick that Washington would beat Toronto, so we were able to predict the upset there. So I guess we could start talking about that series. Paul Pierce talking some trash from the beginning, sure made some of the Toronto fans and players mad, but he was able to back it up big time because Toronto wasn't even able to win one game.
I know. I actually thought this was going to be one of the most evenly matched, exciting matchups of the first round, and actually turned out to be very one-sided.
Yeah.
I mean, Toronto didn't even win a game.
Right. Yeah. They were just dismantled from the very beginning of this series. Even after the first game when Washington won, it didn't look like Toronto had anything that they could do. We could say, all right, well, if they do these 2 or 3 things, they can get back into it, and they'll have some sort of an edge over Washington, where Washington will have a difficult time guarding against or you're playing this type of style. But they were just destroyed by Washington.
And the thing is, Toronto, during the course of the season, they've sort of been declining, but
yeah,
I didn't think that they would just not even win a game in the playoffs.
Sure. I mean, that series should have been a minimum of 5 games. I would say around 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, 4-0 for Washington, not bad.
And one of the things a lot of the NBA analysts have been talking about is how, Toronto has sort of been lacking a true superstar, and I didn't really think it would affect them that much against Washington, but it certainly seems to have.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you look at Washington, like you were saying, Paul Pierce, former All-Star, brought in a lot of veteran leadership and really helped that team, and didn't, maybe Toronto was lacking that.
Maybe. Well, Toronto's done, and the other series that was really not that exciting to watch because we knew what would happen right away was Cleveland versus Boston.
Oh, yeah.
But that one, though, was a lot closer, like a lot of those games were, than the Washington-Toronto series. So I don't know what happened with Toronto, but yeah, I mean, no one expected Boston to be able to win the series. I think they thought since they were a young team, they could at least maybe win one game, but in Cleveland, they knew that they needed to get that series over with and get as much rest as possible. And of course, the less games you play, the lower chances are that you'll have an injury. And unfortunately, in Game 4, Kevin Love got injured, and J.R. Smith did a really stupid thing and got himself suspended for 2 games. And he was lucky it wasn't more, because that was a cheap shot, what he did. So he's lucky he didn't get suspended for 3 or 4 games. But I think that's going to have huge impact on the rest of the Eastern Conference, because Cleveland not having Kevin Love is going to really weaken them and change the dynamics of the Cleveland-Chicago series.
Definitely a lot of dynamics in the first round matchup against Cleveland versus Boston. and a lot of drama as well. I mean, like you said, you have J.R. Smith committing an unnecessary foul, getting a little bit of a suspension there. And then, of course, Kevin Love, he gets his shoulder pulled, and not only is it pulled out of his socket, but it's torn ligaments, and now he's going to have surgery, and basically he's done for the year.
Yeah.
Even during the series, I think it was the last game, Kendrick Perkins actually, he was doing a pick, and he clobbered some guy in the neck. So not really sound decisions by key bench players of Cleveland.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame. I think that for Kevin Love, even if Cleveland goes on to the finals and wins, I think it's going to be really tough for him to watch that, because he knows that, I mean, he'll get the ring, and he was obviously an important part of the regular season to help them get to the position that they're in now and help them win that first round. But I think just, not being able to help from now on, if they do win it all, I think it's going to be really tough for him. And it's going to make it a lot tougher for them, this next series. It's going to would have, been very entertaining and difficult for them to get past Chicago anyways, even with Kevin Love. But now that he's out, and J.R. Smith, it's going to make it even more challenging.
I mean, I definitely agree. There's only, since the beginning of the season, there's only two teams that I could really see winning the championship in the East. And that's Chicago and Cleveland, because some of these other teams have good records, but my problem with them is that they sort of lack the superstar power, and that's so important in the NBA. It's not to say it can't be done, but it's definitely harder.
Sure.
Losing Kevin Love is a huge blow. He's averaging nearly 20 points and 10 rebounds a game. And J.R. Smith sort of is the Kevin Love replacement, because Kevin Love is more consistent, but J.R. Smith, when he wants to, he can really bring up big numbers for them. But I think what really hurts them even more than the scoring, because I really feel like Cleveland is a very well-balanced team. What I think hurts them is the rebounds. One of the reasons I love Kevin Love so much as a player is because his ability to rebound the basketball. It's Charles Barkley was great at it back in the day, and when you have, this is something that the Chicago Bulls had in their later three championships. They had Dennis Rodman, one of the greatest rebounders of all time.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a player who is getting second chance points to guys like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, or in Cleveland Cavaliers' case, Kevin Love is creating second chance points for LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. They already can't double team these guys because they got too many offensive threats. And now you're giving them second chance points because you bring in a guy like Kevin Love, who's so great at rebounding, which is even more amazing considering he has a bad back. But I still have faith in the Cleveland Cavaliers, but it's definitely a huge blow.
Well, then, speaking of that series, we'll talk about Chicago versus Milwaukee. I think that when we knew that they would win, I think that's kind of an appropriate amount. Maybe they could have done it in 5 games versus 6, but Milwaukee was a good team. They had some injuries too this season, but they'll only continue to improve. So, I think Chicago did exactly what they were supposed to in that series. There's nothing much more to say there other than, good effort by both teams, and Chicago handled their business the way they were supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody really expected Milwaukee to win this series. And even though they had their number in the regular season, that's happened many times in the NBA, and it doesn't amount to anything
right
when the playoffs come. I was really impressed with Milwaukee to win 2 games.
Mm-hmm. I didn't expect them to.
Yeah, they have a great young team.
Mm-hmm.
For me, what the series really did, though, was gave me some reassurance in the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah,
they sort of had a rough year because you've got Derrick Rose, one of their key guys, coming in and out of injury. They really stepped it up against Milwaukee. They sort of looked sluggish in the beginning. And I was really worried about Chicago because if you're going to struggle against Milwaukee, obviously you play a team like Cleveland, they're just going to take you to lunch.
Right.
But it took them a few games. They really stepped it up. I think the most reassuring thing as a Chicago fan is how well Derrick Rose really looked, especially at the end of the series. I thought he looked phenomenal, and that last game when they blew him out, Chicago looked really good.
Sure. The last series in the East, Atlanta, Brooklyn, I was pretty surprised that, Atlanta to me didn't look like they were, the number one seed. Obviously, we knew that they were going to win, but I didn't think that they should have lost 2 games. I think at one point the series was tied 2-2. So, I don't know, it just kind of made Atlanta to me not look as dangerous as they did before the playoffs started, because I thought they were a better team than that. And that doesn't, they're probably good enough to win it all, but I don't know how they could have, to a team that was, 8 to 10 games below 500 against a team that won 60 games, and you're tied 2-2 at one point in the first round. That's just not good.
Wow, yeah. Nobody expected much from Brooklyn. They were pretty much the worst team in the East.
Right, and maybe it just shows more of how they were actually better than their record suggested, instead of Atlanta not being as good as we thought about. I don't know.
Yeah, Atlanta eventually took care of business, but makes you wonder about them when they're. I don't know if I would say struggling, but they're a team that's not very good is staying alive against them.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Pierce made an interesting comment during the course of the beginning of the playoffs about Brooklyn, basically saying that during his tenure with Brooklyn that, well, he said a few things, but pertaining to Brooklyn, he said that maybe Darren Williams didn't have the put forth the effort he should from like a star.
Right.
They barely made the playoffs and they're underachieving, so there could be some validity to that statement.
It's true, and even when they have the past few years made the playoffs, they've been eliminated in the first round, kind of like this year.
For me, I was really disappointed in Brooklyn because
I don't think they've went farther than the second round in a long time.
First off, not to get on a side rant here, but no city is better than another city. I like the fact that New Jersey had their own team. And they became the Brooklyn Nets. They got the new owner. I don't even know if I want to attempt to pronounce his name. I think it's Prokhorov.
Prokhorov or something like that.
But they go from New Jersey to Brooklyn. They get their new arena, and I'm excited. I think it's all good things. It's nothing bad, but for me, it's just obviously they're trying to be a title contender. They bring in Kevin Garnett. They bring in Paul Pierce. You already have Joe Johnson, Darren Williams, Brook Lopez, some other guys. And, it didn't take them long to give up. They had 1 year of underperforming. And I know, I think they were over the salary cap, but, they just basically, they cleared house. They got rid of Paul Pierce. They got rid of Kevin Garnett. Retrospectively, it doesn't look like it necessarily affected them at all because they did make the first round of the playoffs, and I think they would have lost no matter who they had that was available. But I don't know. I was just a little bit disappointed that I felt like you look at what Brooklyn's trying to do now, it doesn't really look like they're geared towards trying to be a champion, and I just felt like you gotta have some type of level of patience. You give it 1 year and then it doesn't work out, and then you give up and try to save money. I don't know, man. It's just I could understand a year or two, but
well, moving on to the West, the least interesting series, but maybe the future will be a great matchup: Golden State versus New Orleans. That was to be expected. I don't think anyone thought that New Orleans was gonna win, but I thought maybe they could at least win one game. But I think Golden State just is playing really good basketball right now. So even though New Orleans was able to make it into the playoffs in the West and put together a good effort near the end of the season, it just Golden State had played well the whole year. You don't win over 60 games and, not take care of business in the first round. It has happened, I think, a few times, but when you win that many games, you're a really good team.
I thought that Anthony Davis obviously played phenomenal, and he comes from Kentucky, so that's good for our area. So maybe he's a potential MVP one day. But yeah, I mean, I thought they did pretty good. I mean, they made it competitive, and
and the teams like
they weren't going to win.
the teams like Milwaukee and New Orleans that are young, this is good experience for them. Like Milwaukee winning those 2 games against Chicago, that's huge for them. That's going to help them next season a lot. Next season, I expect them to go for an even higher seed and win, be over 500. This time they were at 500, but, maybe go for around 50 wins instead of 41 or something like that. And then if they get into the playoffs, which I don't see why they wouldn't, it'll give them experience to where they can at least, make the series more competitive and possibly win. And then New Orleans, Anthony Davis and the rest of the guys, be good experience for them.
Yeah.
Because a few years ago, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, when Golden State they were kind of in the same boat. They were, good, they were rising, and then they'd get knocked out in the first or second round, and then this year they're one of the favorites to possibly make it to the finals or maybe win everything. So
every team in the NBA has different goals, and some teams just want to make the playoffs, and that's fair because obviously every team, when they're in the playoffs, their philosophy is we want to win a championship. But realistically speaking, you're not going to be a team that's the first year in the playoffs for that roster, and you're not going to win the championship. It's just, I mean, you can have LeBron James on your team and not win a championship. So,
right. Brooklyn Nets thought they wanted to win it, but I don't think anybody filled out a bracket and had them winning it all.
I mean, yeah, it's just, obviously their goal will probably be to at least win a first round or win a game,
right?
And hopefully not play the Golden State Warriors.
But that can teach you a lot. Yeah, sometimes even if you lose all 4, at least you see how competitive it is and what it takes to win. So that can be a good learning experience as well.
And you hear NBA players talk about it all the time about how the playoff environment is so much different than the regular season. So it's good that those young guys got that under their belt.
Well, let's see. I guess we can talk about Portland versus Memphis. I was kind of surprised that only went to 5 games. I thought Portland would have given Memphis a little more of a challenge, but I think ultimately, Memphis should have won it in, 5 or 6 games, kind of how they did. I wouldn't see Portland being able to beat Memphis more than, twice. But I think Memphis is just a really good team. They have a lot of big guys. Their defense is awesome. It's going to be a really fun matchup between Memphis and Golden State. And we'll talk about who we think is going to win it and why shortly. But Memphis is just a beast on defense, and they have so many good bigs, and kind of their deep team. And they don't have a superstar like a LeBron or a Derrick Rose, but they have a lot of other great players who are able to work together, and they've been a relevant team for quite some time now. And I think their mindset is kind of like Golden State's. We've been making it to the playoffs. We've been doing well in the regular season for the past few years. It's time to make a push.
I think the biggest worry for Memphis is obviously Mike Conley, but they're definitely a team on the rise. They're one of those teams that they've been staying in the middle ground a few years. They're not in that upper echelon, but they're not in the lower seeds where they're not going to do anything. They might have finally turned the corner. Portland was a good team, and another thing to remember is a lot of the seeding in the West doesn't even matter because
it's all within a few games anyways.
They're all
1 or 2 games.
They're all 1 or 2 games apart. So
other than Golden State.
Yeah, I thought maybe Portland could have made it more competitive, but I mean I'm not really surprised at the results or anything.
Yeah, I think Memphis is just. They clearly are the better team. No matter what, they were just too deep. Their defense, like I said, is really good. They were able to make it very difficult to score and, let Portland do what they wanted just because they're tough. They play physical basketball. So
some of these games are like wake-up calls to these teams to sort of see where they stand. And
right.
I think for Portland, now they know that there's a distance between them and maybe, Memphis and some of these other teams. So they'll have to either retool or sometimes the players just gotta get better.
Well, and then the series that surprised me the most was Houston versus Dallas. I think that we did talk about why we picked Dallas to win, but it was just because, they're going to be upset, so that's one of the reasons why I picked Dallas over Houston. And I really did think that they were deeper, so I thought that would give them a bigger advantage. They were more experienced. Dirk had gone to the finals and won a championship, and he'd been to the finals twice, so I just thought that would give them a little edge over Houston, but I mean, this wasn't even close at all. Like I was surprised. I mean, I really would have thought like if Houston or Dallas won, that it would be a minimum of 6 games. I thought that series should go into 7 games, but I don't know what happened there with Dallas. Other than, and not to take anything away from Houston because they are an amazing team. White and Harden are really good 1-2 punch, and they definitely have a good chance of winning the championship this year. The way they played against Dallas definitely made them one of the favorites, in my opinion.
I think how I have to address this series is there's really been 4 teams, and we'll get in more detail later, but just to preface what happened in this series, there's basically 4 teams that I thought had a chance to win a championship. And Golden State, Memphis, San Antonio, and Dallas. And Dallas was my dark horse pick, but what I liked about Dallas was their depth and the number of veterans on the team.
Yeah.
Houston has depth. I mean, they got Smith, they got Jason Terry, they got some players. I just felt like I felt like Dallas had more depth.
Right.
But really, I mean, Dallas has sort of been cruising all year and not really been great. And I thought maybe Rondo and Amari Stoudemire would have put them over the top.
Yeah, that's what was so surprising to me. Like they had so many guys that that they should have been able to utilize and collectively should have been able to beat a Houston team that maybe has better superstars right now since Dirk is past his prime, but using all those guys together should have been able to make the difference, or at least make the series close. But this wasn't even close. I would understand this a little bit better if they had lost in 6 games or 7, but in 5, that's just really, really low.
I mean, there was a lot of drama already in the course of the season. Rajon Rondo and Rick Carlisle, the head coach, didn't really get along because it seems as though Rick Carlisle is very controlling of the offense, and Rajon Rondo is more of a free-flowing type player. A lot of the NBA analysts,
Analysts,
whatever you want to say, man, but they say a lot of these players, especially when they win championships, sort of earn their right to call plays and do stuff on their own. And I'm not really going to pick a side, but what I will say is both ways have worked. I mean, Rajon Rondo was the point guard in Boston when they won a championship.
Right.
And Rick Carlisle, he coached Dallas, to their championship. So both ways worked. I sort of felt like just watching the series and maybe some of the plays Rondo made, I sort of felt like he should have tried to fit in a little bit more. I think it really hurt the team because once he was out, they looked a lot more competitive. They sort of looked like the Dallas of old. So I really think that I'm not saying they would have won the series, but that certainly hurt them a lot.
I agree. Nothing more to say there. I thought that was kind of bad. It looked really a little bit unprofessional. Not good to have happen in the middle of the playoffs.
I mean, I think it really hurt them. Dirk is like a lot of these veterans. You see it sort of on the Spurs too, but they may not be the main guy every night. But when it comes time for the clutch shots and the big plays, they'll make them. And Dirk, obviously, he's got bad knees and he's sort of slow and everything, but he pretty much can still deliver on the clutch plays. But I just felt like, Houston did a good job. I'm not saying they.
Now you completely.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, Rajon Rondo officially ended the series because of an injury. I think it was a back injury.
Yeah.
And like a lot of guys, he had been playing through it and just hadn't said anything. And that's sort of the official reason he's not on the team. I think it's all drama, though. I don't think it's all drama. I think it's sort of like just a politically correct thing they do. There was definitely some stuff going on behind the scenes. First off, they didn't even pay Rajon Rondo for the playoff games as part of the team. Not that it really matters, but for the chump change it was compared to what they make. But he was done with the team. He wasn't going to be there in suit and tie supporting the team in the rest of the games, which he didn't. And some of the answers Rick Carlisle gave in interviews, it's pretty clear that the future of Rajon Rondo and Dallas are not together. So it's just it's a sort of unfortunate because I felt like, Dallas has all this talent and to end on drama sort of sucks. But Dallas has always been great at retooling, so we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, that's true. We'll see. I don't think they need to add too much more, but we'll see. Maybe some younger guys or something defensively, or we'll see what they can do in the off season. But the most entertaining series by far was the only 7-game series in the first round, the Clippers versus the Spurs, and both of us initially picked the Spurs to win because I think that the first round and I think they had never been able to successfully defend their championship, so I think they really thought that this year they had a pretty good chance. So, we thought Clippers, they're a great team, but, maybe not good enough to be able to knock out the Spurs in the first round. So we picked them, but, Chris Paul I didn't think he was that good. We both knew that he was an amazing player, but never would have thought he was as good as he was.
Mr. Clutch.
And for me, it was really, if you were going to say the one person who's going to play well for the Clippers, obviously, you would know that it was Chris Paul, but how well Blake Griffin played was amazing. He made so many mid-range shots because a year ago, just leave him open, he'll miss that most of the time. And it was almost no threat unless he went for a layup or a big dunk. But he really was able to show a new side on offense. And all those assists that he was giving during the games, getting others involved and making it easier, that I think maybe was the big difference. So even though, in Game 7, Chris Paul was the main guy and, he made the winning shot, but, throughout the series, if Blake Griffin didn't play as well as he did, even though Chris Paul was clearly the best player, they don't win, and it's not even close. And I think it's not that the Spurs played bad. It's just I think it was, this would have been their third try for the finals in 3 years. They are an older team, especially their core, like Ginobili, Duncan, and Parker. So it was difficult for them, I think, to go for another really competitive series. You can kind of see where at times, the guys that would normally step up weren't able to, and I think it happened to all three of them. Yeah, this was, I think, good for the Clippers because it shows that they're finally able to move up. For the past few years, right? They'd get knocked out by a tough team either in the first round or the second round, and they just can't get over that hurdle. But even if they don't win in this next round, at least they can say, we don't have as much to improve on as we would have initially had they lost to the first round, because now they know how to beat a really good team, a champion like the Spurs. So I saw a lot of positives there for them. And the only thing else I wanted to say about Chris Paul was, obviously we both talked about how good he was, but last night's performance reminded me, not exactly like it, but a little bit of Isaiah Thomas when he played in the finals, when he had a worse injury, and of course that was the finals. But, it reminded me a little bit of that because he played through the pain, he played, semi-hurt, or I don't know how hurt exactly he was, but he was, he was injured, playing through that and having an amazing game. I think he shot like 9 for 12 or 9 for 13.
Wow.
And he was 5 for 6 from the 3-point line. So it just reminded me a little bit of that when I was watching a few months ago the Bad Boy Pistons documentary.
Yeah.
Kind of talked about that series when he was injured, when they played the Lakers in the finals. I think they did lose that series, Detroit, but it just reminded me a little bit of Isaiah Thomas. Not as great, but this is of course the first round. That was the finals, but still, little bit of that. So that was really fun to watch as a basketball fan. Regardless of which team you like and who you wanted to win, just being able to see someone kind of sacrifice and play in pain and at an amazing level though is really exciting. And then of course after the game, no classier guys than the Spurs.
No doubt.
Yeah, I mean Tim Duncan is an amazing individual. Not just the success he's had winning and getting to the finals, but just as an individual person, really, really classy guy. What a lot of players should aspire to be like.
Definitely.
He doesn't cry or whine or blame others, and he takes full responsibility. And then, of course, it reminded me of how amazing the two coaches are. Every time I listen to Doc Rivers say something, I get more and more respect for him. And he pointed out something great when he said that the series, he was really glad that it made him a better person after watching it and being part of it, because this was a close series decided by fewer points than almost any other in history. And
that's insane.
You didn't have any flagrant fouls. You didn't have any pushing. I mean, you're pushing and shouting, but you didn't have any fights. You didn't have any of that nonsense that happens where you have half the team try to fight the other half, and then everyone has to get involved to break up something stupid. So that's just really, it just shows you how good these two leaders are to get their players to play basketball the way it's supposed to be played and not turn it into a WWF, Royal Rumble
right.
When you're not getting your way or you're losing.
I mean, wow, what do I say? Where to start? I'm obviously depressed because I like the Spurs, but at least they whooped Miami last year, so that makes me happy. It was an amazing series. When you look at the Clippers, they sort of seem, to me, they're in the same position as Houston, and that is they sort of had guys who are on the verge of being superstars, and are they going to make it over the hump or are they not going to make it over the hump? And really, I felt like the main players on the Clippers, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan, all stepped up.
Except for when DeAndre Jordan's on the free throw line.
Yeah, he's so bad.
I did not know until just recently that he was 38% or under 40% free throw percentage. That's ridiculous.
That's so horrible.
I know that like Shaq and even at one point Tim Duncan and Dwight Howard were bad, but I'd never seen somebody average 38 or 37%. That's pathetically low.
Yeah, I mean, Spurs did a good strategy to hack Jordan. I think it helped them, especially with their age, and it sort of stopped the Clippers' momentum and helped them get rest.
You gotta slow it down so they can drink the prune juice.
Yep. I think for me, watching the Clippers, I was most impressed with Blake Griffin because he was sort of a guy who was really athletic and could make the big athletic play, but he really has become more mature and has a more well-rounded game. And I felt really bad for Tim Duncan because he's so old and he's got to go up against Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, who are both extremely physical and are beating him up all the time. And I mean, he played like a legend. He really couldn't get around DeAndre Jordan too much because he's so powerful. But somehow or another, he kept making ridiculously tough shot after ridiculously tough shot. It's pretty amazing. For me, I'm like, I mean, this was just such an insane series. I actually thought the Spurs would probably pull away a little bit more. But the Clippers really proved me wrong because they really stepped up and were veterans. They became more of a veteran team, more mature team. It was a series no one could predict. If anybody told you they knew the winner of this series, they were lying because, I mean, this was just back and forth.
Charles Barkley knew.
Except for Charles Barkley, of course.
He stuck with it.
But man, I mean, every game was close except for the Spurs blew them out one game. I think the Clippers got in hand another game, but it was just back and forth the whole series. no matter what either team did, they could never pull away. It was so frustrating to watch, wanting the Spurs to win. And really, I felt like it just came down to who had the last possession. Chris Paul made an amazing game to win the game. He was over, like, I forget who was over. It might have been Tim Duncan and Kawhi Leonard or something, but amazing shot. And I was really happy with the way it ended because the refs try not to call too many fouls in the last plays because they don't want to determine the outcome.
Right.
But they sort of bailed Chris Paul out with a foul the play before. They usually don't call that foul. It was a touch foul on his follow-through after he shot it. And usually they wouldn't call that on like a last play scenario in the playoffs. But they sort of had a makeup call with Tim Duncan, who fortunately hit both his free throws. So I was obviously disappointed to see the Spurs lose, but
Not me.
I felt like I felt like they lost in a I'm satisfied with their loss because the refs didn't control the outcome. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'm MJ.
BD.
And we'll catch you next time with more insights